We're good?
You good?
Alright, wonderful. Hello Alex, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How are you, Danny?
I'm good. Thank you for allowing me to come over here and interview today.
My pleasure. Glad to help.
You are glad to help?
I am.
Okay. Ready to get started?
Yeah.
Alright, so as you know, I've been doing my projects recently. It's about Flower Boy, Tyler the Creator.
Yeah.
And we are...
Great album, by the way. Great album.
It is a good album. It's top 3 of mine all time.
I don't know if it's that good, but it's good.
It is good. But anyway, I'm pretty much discussing the major themes of it.
Yeah.
And one of the major themes is depression.
Mm-hmm.
With him trying to just talk about his self-identity and self-worth and stuff. And I figured I would conduct an interview to help convey this idea and get a better understanding of it, especially with someone like yourself.
Well, I don't struggle with depression, so I'm not sure what you mean, but I'm glad to help.
You've never struggled with depression before?
No, not clinically. I've been sad, but not depressed.
Obviously, clinically, I think that's a more rare occasion.
It's actually not. If you look at the statistics that have been put out by organizations like the CDC and things like that, clinical depression is one of the leading causes for suicide in America, and suicide is one of the leading causes of death among college students. So clinical depression is a very it's a rising thing that hasn't been getting the attention that it definitely deserves. The attention, not only from pop culture but from the medical community as well.
Yeah, I've definitely found that recently it's been almost a resurgence of a lot of the attention's been focused on it now, and I do think a lot of media artists, for example, even Tyler with this album, it's one of the main focuses, and I think it's getting some really good exposure recently. Do you agree with that?
I would agree. I would agree that it's getting good exposure, but I think the exposure hasn't been in the correct light in order to adequately deal with it. Okay. I think that depression is a serious issue. I think it should be taken seriously. Like I said, it's the number one leading cause for suicide, but suicide, especially among people of our age group, is one of the leading causes of death, which is a tragic situation that nobody, no friends, family members, anything like that should have to go through under any circumstance. And I just think that I think that there should be more made aware on how to cope with it. I think bringing it to the forefront of the discussion is great, but I feel like it's just brought up that people struggle with it, and we don't follow it up with how to deal with it, how to cope with it, and how to move forward from it. And I think that's the next step that we need to take as a society, is how to address those issues, not just bringing it up and mentioning it, but actually addressing it and improving it and giving people mechanisms to be able to cope with those.
So you're saying is, because right now we're pretty much at the surface level almost.
Surface level, and it's almost like, oh yeah, I listen to the song, it talks about depression, move on with my life. There's no tangible emotional attachment to it. It's a good song, it talks about depression, all right, let me listen to something else,
Okay.
And so there's not the attachment, and there's not the follow-up of, hey, here's what you can do, it's an issue, now let's talk about how to solve it. So that's what I think.
That does bring me to another point, and that's one of the main coping mechanisms, I guess, is doctors will prescribe antidepressants, and I was wondering what your opinion about that is.
I think they're helpful. I don't think antidepressants should be the go-to. I don't think you come in and tell a doctor you're depressed and they prescribe you antidepressants. I think they have severe psychological and physical effects on humans that shouldn't be able to deal with it. There are people that have struggled with depression before modern medicine that were able to cope with it and live through it. And I think that we need to focus more on coping mechanisms. Obviously, clinically, if there's a chemical imbalance, the antidepressants do help with that type of, evening out the chemicals, making sure, that chemical imbalance is addressed. But people that just struggle with depression, and even clinical depression, I think should have other options besides a medication. Because oftentimes, I think as a society, we become too reliant on medications. That's why I think you see an increase in opioid use outside of prescribed mechanisms. Back in the 90s, you saw a huge increase in crack cocaine. You see all these types of illegal drugs that people get addicted to that can have good purposes but get abused in the process. And so I think that in an instance, we need to not only prescribe them and use them sparingly, and give people other options and other methods to be able to cope with it. And I don't think it should be the go-to as show up, I'm depressed, here's an antidepressant, go on with your life. I think it should be show up, let's go see a psychologist. Let's go see what the issue is. Let's diagnose the issue, see how severe it actually is, and then come up with a treatment plan from there, as opposed to just having a factory of creating, all right, you're depressed, antidepressants, all right, move on. I'm not diminishing the effect that antidepressants can have. I mean, I have friends that are on them, and they do have significantly improved effects on people's moods. But I don't think that it should be the go-to. I think it should be something that's only there if it's needed and used sparingly.
It's not the universal fix that sometimes people portray it to be.
I definitely don't think it's the universal fix. I think sometimes people are depressed, and they don't know how to cope with something, so it's extended depression. And sometimes you misdiagnose that as clinical depression. And obviously I'm not a doctor, but that's just my own kind of personal opinion. I think sometimes we have huge traumatic events in our lives that have a longer coping mechanism, and we're like, oh, we're depressed and we've been depressed, so let's just give them an antidepressant, see if that helps, as opposed to saying, no, like, let's talk about what the issue is, you know, and if the issue stems from something that happened in our life, and how we can, you know, not move on, but continue living happily through that, and learning something through that. This is something I find important.
How important is it to have someone to talk to?
I think it's extremely important. I think having somebody to talk to about certain issues is healthy. Just in general, I think it's important to bounce ideas off of each other because you don't know everything. I mean, I know everything, but not everybody does. And so, no, I'm obviously not kidding. I don't know everything. But it's one of those things. I just think that having somebody to talk to provides great advice, and it helps share the burden. You don't have to carry the burden by yourself. But also to realizing that that person is not a psychologist. They don't, you know, if you are struggling with something severe and you do need to seek medical help, that talking to a friend isn't going to fulfill the same role that talking to somebody that is trained to deal with these issues, such as a counselor or a psychologist, is going to be able to help you with in that instance.
So in that kind of situation, if you are the friend, that's the kind of area where you probably want to move that along and maybe point them to.
Yes, as a friend, you want to point them to. They'll obviously still be there for them, but saying this, I think you need to explore other options. I think this is more than I can handle. This is more than my expertise. Let me get you plugged into multiple resources. Like I know Florida State, something I deeply care about Florida State. That's something that's been very good. We've opened up counseling center. I mean, Health and Wellness has done a lot of mental health awareness type things, and Florida State and the university system has been pushing mental health awareness for college students because it is something that a lot of people in our age group do struggle with. Moving out on your own, having the stress of being an adult, paying bills, studying, social life, things like that, it can be very detrimental. It can have a very negative effect. So the university and our community definitely does provide some great resources and great opportunities to help people be able to deal with this issue of depression.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. And another point is traditionally speaking, kids, like boys, have been raised for I don't know how long to always keep their emotions bottled up inside and to not talk about things because it's not manly and it's not cool to do. Do you think that's had an effect on our age group today and why that men are suffering from depression at all?
I think so. I mean, I don't necessarily buy into that. I mean, it is kind of a thing, but I mean, I do think guys, especially if you're close to people, I think you do open up. I think that's a cop-out for a lot of people. I think a lot of people use it as a cop-out. Oh, I'm a man, I don't want to talk about it. And I think that, especially with our society and how we're dealing with it, we have destigmatized the idea that men can't open up about their emotions, that men can't be emotional. I think that it's something that our parents definitely fell victim to. I think that's why you definitely see it a lot with men in their 40s and 50s. I think as you see the younger generations, you don't see as many mental health issues with men. And granted, you know, with recent school shootings, a lot of those people have had mental health issues and they haven't talked about them, and they have been men. But I don't think that's a causation of men not talking about their emotions. I think that's them not feeling like they're accepted and they don't have anybody to turn to. I feel like if men and children are given resources, mentors, people they trust, they open up to them. I mean, in my experience, I mentor younger people and they've opened up to me about stuff they would never open up to people about. So I don't necessarily buy into that idea. I think part of the issue is that we were taught as men that men didn't invest in the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I'm going to be your coach, and I'm going to coach you inside the lines of the football field, and then outside of that, I don't want to talk about anything else. It was a very black and white system where there was no investment. And I think the investment aspect brings along the emotional attachment and the space in which you're able to express yourself as a man.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely do think that men are more sheltered, but I think men that have those mentors are much more likely to be able to cope with and have somebody to talk to about depression, as opposed to men who don't have that mentorship. And that's why I think mentorship and investment is such a huge pivotal role that needs to happen, especially in men's life, because it brings about that type of space and emotional connection where they have somebody older than them, the same age as them, they're able to open up to about issues in their life that could lead to depression.
Okay. That's a really good answer.
It is. I'm a very intelligent man.
I know you are.
I'm glad you know.
That's why we selected you.
I know. People like to interview smart people. I'm quite aware. I do it a lot.
Very humble.
I am extremely humble. I try to be.
All right. Well, that was my last main question I had for you. Thank you.
Main question, you don't have any some more sub questions?
Well, I do, but we can talk about this later.
We don't want to put them on the camera? I think we should put them on camera. I do have one question for you, though. Can you tell me who this is? Can we show it for the camera?
Well, anyway, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Glad to help.
Have a good rest of the night.
Thank you.